Hello, this is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr. Today we're going to be talking about a story that went off the rails a bit last week, and I'm sure you guys have heard by now. There was a story about a 10-year-old who crossed state lines to seek an abortion, and the Biden administration even made international news. The Biden administration talked about it. People started to fact check it and be concerned that this was a real story. Because there was a bunch of red flags, and there's like one source, and it was an abortion activist. And so unfortunately this turned out to be a true story, but there was still some fake news involved. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about that, because the last time I talked about, at least on air, the attorney general was like, we haven't even got a whiff of this report. So at that point in time, I'm like, it's probably fake. I wish it was fake. But it is true. But there was some fake news along with it. So we're going to talk about that. Dr. Brix, you may remember Dr. Brix. She's right alongside Trump during, all those mini White House briefings regarding to COVID. She came out with a book, and she also had to testify in front of Congress. But she knew that 15 days to slow the spread was always going to be a lie. And I think we all know within ourselves that was always not true, but she knew that it was not true as they were pitching it. And even as they said it, she was already planning her next, how are we going to expand this? So they did their darndest to trick the president of the United States and other people and Americans. So I think that's wild. Though we all know that to be the case. It's kind of weird to me that people would admit to it so blatantly and put it in a book. But yeah, that's why you shouldn't really trust experts, because some people are just after the truth, but there was some data that didn't jive with her, so she would look other places to kind of find her data and present it in a way, hide things if necessary to get the end result that she wanted. And it didn't result in good things, in my humble opinion. So we're also going to be talking about that. Also want to mention Eric July, give a shout out to him, because he's launched his own comic book company and called the Rippaverse, and he is just killing it. He's raised more than $2 million since last Monday. So very, very proud of him. He's a Black libertarian who works for the Blaze, and the comic book folks of the old guard of the wokeverse is just losing it. They're so upset. So we're going to be talking about all those things today and more. But before we hop into it, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com and check out different articles that we have on the website. One of the articles that I think I published on Sunday night, or no, it was probably Saturday night, I think, about Allie Stuckley. Media Matters did a hit piece on her, and it was essentially hating on her because she's right wing, and they phrase it as if she's using her fundamentalist Christian values and weaponizing them to push her right wing worldview, as opposed to recognizing that she has a conservative worldview because she's a Christian. And I said, Media Matters could have just saved us all the time and just said, we hate Christians, this is why, and we're salty that they have influence. So I wrote a piece about that. I actually saw that she liked it, so that's cool. But you guys can check that out on the website. Got other great articles that you guys can check out. I am working on a anti-abortion book right now, particularly expanding on the article that I wrote about the Bible being blatantly against abortion. I know I make a lot of secular arguments, but I feel that it's needed within the church, especially how people try to dull down Christian morality so they can infuse it with other stuff and make it more palatable. I'm not cool with that, so I'm expanding on that article and have a lot of great facts in it, a lot of good data. and a lot of good debunking of a lot of pro-choice arguments, and also arguments that they try to use the Bible that they don't even legitimately believe in, but people need to know how to push back against those sort of talking points. So I'm compiling it. I really started writing it yesterday, about almost about 5,000 words in, and so I'll let you know and keep up with my progress. I plan to put it out pretty quick. So we're all debating these topics right now, so I think it's a very important sort of book to have out there in the hands of the people. So I'm excited about it. Shouldn't be difficult to do. I talk about it all the time. Also, make sure that you guys are subscribing, putting your emails in the newsletter, on the website, that you guys are liking, subscribing across all the different social media platforms. All my handles are at Black Tea News, with the exception of Twitter. That one's at True Black Tea. Make sure that you guys check out different merchandise that we have on the website that you guys can get. Like the "You Are Not That Special." We got those in t-shirts and also in cute little mugs. We got black tea mugs. We got this cool Frederick Douglass shirt. The Constitution is a glorious liberty document, and people love the goat hoodie and the t-shirts. Very, very comfortable hoodies. You guys should get them. I love that. I have the shirt and I have not worn my shirt. Now I think about it, I do have it. But that hoodie is great. Anyway, I also want to thank Brighter Michigan Pack. I'm in their studio today. If I say something today that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that. They just like to uplift conservative voices, and I'm always grateful to be here. I had a long weekend. On Thursday, I went to the Brighter Michigan Pack's event for these fallen, wounded, and soldiers fund. And 97% of everything that they raise goes directly to troops in need. So they're a great organization. But I got really sick there. Not there. I was sick before I got there, and I didn't realize how kind of sick I was. I'm like, I'm gonna power through it, and I couldn't power through it. But I was there instead of doing the show. And then on Friday, a longtime church member had an event. Was very proud and honored to ask to sing, and so I was there. So that's where I was. If you were wondering where I was, but I'm glad to be with you here on today to catch up a little bit on what we didn't talk about at the end of the week and news of the weekend and coming into this week. So I actually don't have a funny story for you guys, or a funny meme. I will recommend Ali Stuckley put out a pretty funny video making fun of Elizabeth Warren, who has it out for pregnancy crisis centers. So she got herself a funny little wig and went to pregnancy crisis centers and was just like, oh, these evil people with these comfortable chairs. This is where they lure these pregnant women into safety. It just like stuff like that. So it's like, it was over 3 minutes long, so I didn't want to play the whole thing, but I want to recommend just looking at it, because it is absurd. And the video is less absurd than the actual reality of Elizabeth Warren being upset that pregnancy crisis centers exist. But that's just the sort of evil that we're dealing with, and I do legitimately mean evil. I think I'm going to make like a top 10. I don't know, it's got to be more than 10, like the top most evil sort of politicians in regard to abortion. And Elizabeth Warren is going to rate very high, going after pregnancy crisis centers, being mad that they exist and that they help women decide to keep their babies, that they will pay for diapers and strollers and give parenting classes. The fact that they see an organization like that as a bad thing, that rates pretty high, like maybe top 5. But I don't know, Northam, like saying the comment of like babies who survive abortion, like, well, we'll have to let the families and the doctors have that conversation. Like, the baby's out, you can't at least let it live. Obama said some crazy stuff. Hillary Clinton's up there. Beto O'Rourke's up there. It's going to be a hard top. I'm going to try to rate them in accordance to evil, but I'm torn. If you guys have any suggestions, you can let me know in the comments. But I'm going to put that list together. But Warren's making it up quite high. She is, certainly. But let's jump to our first major story of the day. So there was a story going around about a 10-year-old. I'm sure you guys heard of it, because it made international news. And Joe Biden also mentioned this story when he gave a speech and addressed like the nation. So there was a story about a 10-year-old who was just a little bit over on the days in Ohio, and had to flee to Indiana for an abortion. And the only source to the story was this abortion doctor who is an activist. So people started questioning, is this story legit? So one person who really, really went ham on the story and did this really, really big thread, it was an impressive thread of all these red flags, was Megan Fox, not the actress who drinks blood of her boyfriend. And I'm not joking. She did. Megan Fox, the actress, actually drinks blood, but the journalist who works for PJ Media went on this long thread and just lists some different red flags. And so one of the flags was that the only source was this abortion doctor who was an activist, and she listed different times they were cited and different anti-Trump stuff and pro-abortion stuff. This is their business. They're part of protecting it, right? So there's some motivation there. Also mentioned the fact that it didn't seem like anyone was putting in the effort who wrote the story with the Indy Star to verify a lot of the things, to get back when people were asking questions. They couldn't find like any police reports at the time regarding the story. So she wasn't the only one who thought it was fishy. The Washington Post did a story on it. But before the Washington Post did a story on it, I looked at Snopes, and I'm not like, let me check out what Snopes had to say kind of person. They usually veer kind of left. And I'm like, well, if they had something, they would probably err on the, it's true thing, but they couldn't say that it was verified. And they looked into it. They said a lot of people like wrote in asking Snopes if they could verify it, and they just said that they couldn't verify it. So people were just noting, hey, the story can't be verified. And so then people started kind of shifting towards, is this story true? And people kind of took a more definitive line of, I don't think that's really the case, when the Attorney General of Ohio was like, I haven't got a whiff of a story like this. This would be a really big like offense as far as crime, and I haven't seen anything for it. So then that started nudging people to, I don't think this happened. So unfortunately, it did happen where there was a 10-year-old victim. And there were some people dunking like, oh, you guys, it's real. I'm like, that's nothing to be happy about. I'm like, I wish this wasn't a true story. Because that is a terrible, heinous crime. And that was one thing, because I certainly went through Megan Fox's feed to see what she was the one who like pushed this really out in mainstream. She was on Tucker Carlson's show talking about the red flags and so on. So she was like, I'm glad that me talking about this story, because there wasn't really a focus on this heinous crime. The shift of the story, the focus on the story was that this 10-year-old had to cross state lines to get an abortion. She's like, this is a really evil act, yet where's the police report? Where are people talking about this person who did this evil, heinous thing? So she was remaining firm in she did the right thing. And other people went and tried to fact check it, and they were just saying, hey, this is kind of a shoddy story. And then other journalists went out and did more due diligence and ended up getting to the fact that this was actually a real story. Now there's still some fake news associated with it. So fake news is that she did end up crossing state lines for the abortion, but in Ohio, she wouldn't have had to, and that's something that the Attorney General actually confirmed. They don't just have an exception for the life of the mother in Ohio. It's a lot broader than that. So if the birth would result in something, and like where it would like deform you, do like really terrible damage to you, then an abortion is actually legal in the state. And since we're talking about a 10-year-old, and a freshly 10-year-old would still be like 10 when the baby was born, in the state of Ohio, regardless of whether you feel like it should still be permissible or not permissible, the fact of the law is that it would still be permissible. So in this case, no, she did not have to cross state lines, go to Indiana in order to have this abortion. So there's that. People were concerned whether or not the abortion doctor ended up reporting it. And so they were actually like coming for her legally and stuff. and questioning whether she had violated HIPAA. Last I looked, her employer didn't think that she had violated HIPAA and she wasn't being disciplined, and she had reported it. But the interesting thing, sick thing, and questionable thing is that she reported that it was another minor who had raped this girl and that they were 17, but the man who did it is 27. So there's a lot of questions. Now, the reporting of this man was interesting in the mainstream media because they start reporting that it was an Ohioman. That's how they were reporting it. And then people are like, is this a legal resident of Ohio? Because it's not even a legal resident of the country. This person is an illegal alien. Now, people are like, aha, Biden in the border. This actually happened. He's been in the country a few years. So he didn't like recently come through when they were whipping people on horses, which is fake news, but that's not what happened. He's been here for a couple years. Still, we need to do something about our border. I get what you guys are saying, but just FYI, let's be accurate as accurate as possible with our criticisms. But yeah, he was an illegal alien. So it was curious when people started listing him as Ohioman, as opposed to someone who is, I mean, people use the term undocumented, and but he was an illegal alien. Now, the weirdest, most twisted thing about this story is actually, I don't know the weirdest, most twisted thing about the story, but another twisted, weird thing about the story is that the mother is like taking his side, and I'm not sure exactly what's that about. But there was a reporter who went to the home of the woman, and she said everything they're saying about him isn't true, and she said her daughter's fine. And I'm like, that's a heck of a thing that you say that she's fine from, but here's a little piece of the video.
¿La niña vivía aquí también?
Sí, pero ella está bien. Todo lo que están diciendo en contra de él es mentira.
Ya. ¿Y la niña, usted es familiar de la niña o
Es
solamente?
mi hija.
La señora, quien se negó a dar su nombre y quien ocultó su rostro, asegura que ella no ha impuesto cargos en contra de Gerson Fuentes, de 27 años, quien está acusado de violación. De acuerdo a las autoridades, él confesó que tuvo contacto vaginal al menos 2 veces con la niña, que recientemente cumplió 10 años, por lo que se estima que pudiera haber tenido 9 años cuando fue violada y quedó en embarazo.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's someone that the mother knows and is protecting, a boyfriend, or if he is supposed to be a boyfriend of the child, but this is something that's happened multiple times. Were they fleeing the state to, I don't know, get past, this is speculation, around like the immigration policies, or status rather, or were they really concerned about the law in Texas, in Ohio? Because again, and I can understand people being confused. You just hear like the media and what people are saying, and you're like, oh shoot, I won't be able to have the abortion. I think, it was also like recommended to go to Indiana and stuff. So, but technically, because of how the laws are written, it's broader than just simply the life of the mother. Like, she's going to die. A 10-year-old would have been like likely permanently damaged from, I mean, could be rendered like not able to even have kids again if they went through that'd be a brutal pregnancy on the body at that time. So they would be able to have an abortion at that time according to the Ohio law. So she wouldn't have needed to go to Indiana. But this is like opening up more questions, certainly. So I haven't seen over the weekend this story like getting still the amount of traction that it was before. I don't know that it will, now that it's sort of shift narratives a bit. I think it is still like important to discuss these really small percentage heartbreaking cases. Um, but everything about this is just so sad that this young lady went through, this young child, whatever is going on in the home, that there's all these narratives at play. The fact that now there is this charge and the baby that was killed is just like evidence. Everything about it is sad, and I wish the story wasn't true. Unfortunately, is true. But I just wanted to correct some of the fake news and some of the narrative surrounding it. And once the attorney general was like, "There's not even a whiff of this," I was like, "Well, then the story is probably not true." So thought it was also my responsibility to come in here and correct the facts and set the story straight. But if there's any more stories or updates surrounding this, I'll let you guys know. But man, this is a wild, sick story, and it sounds like that child needs to be placed in some better care if based on that video. So oh gosh, we live in a sick, twisted, sad world. Moving on. I'm sure you guys remember Dr. Brix when you'd watch the White House briefings regarding to COVID. And if you had to guess, like, who like pushed things like off the rails as far as like being nefarious, I think people like mostly, like maybe on the right or whatever, people on the left have like candles of Fauci, right? But you probably go like, Fauci's, he's popping up and he's lying all the time. He popped up recently, was talking about masks or something, and we're like, nope. Somebody who isn't even into politics that much I overheard having a conversation with, I think it was like Friday night at church, like, you ain't even heard of Fauci. He been gone. And he pops up all of a sudden to push it. And so, which, yeah, Fauci's like back in the public light or whatever. It's like, yeah, we might need to do lockdowns or masking or whatever. Like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're done. Well, I guess if you're in LA or something, maybe you're screwed because everybody's crazy there. But like, no, we're done. I don't think, I think the Democrats would only push it if they really felt it was advantageous enough for them to be able to, I don't know, push like mass mail-in voting or something like that. But I think ultimately, like, if they tried that here in Michigan, people would probably flip their lid. I don't think my governor is that crazy at this point. She had her power trip before. She wants to win re-election, and I think she's not politically stupid enough to do something like that. But we'll see what they try to push. But most people will probably assume that Fauci was like a super nefarious sort of person, and maybe not think that much of Dr. Brix. Dr. Brix wrote a book, and Dr. Brix like just spilled the tea about how she manipulated the president and the data and Americans because she wanted lockdowns, and it's just so messed up. It's so messed up how she manipulated people. And when people talk about trusting the experts, you have to understand that not all experts come to the correct conclusions, and some people want the data to reflect what they want to do. And Brix couldn't quite find the data here. And according to what was going on at the CDC, what they're reporting to justify the sort of measures that she wanted taken. Therefore, she would look to other countries to get the sort of data and then hide things and rearrange things and present them in a certain way to push what she wanted. And she wanted lockdowns, and she didn't want 15 days to slow the spread. She knew it was a lie when they said it. And as soon as they said it, she was already working on how they're going to completely keep expanding it. Now, she's not the only expert. There are other experts that disagreed with how the White House and other people were doing things. There was the Great Barrington Declaration, where you had different epidemiologists that were like, this, like, we need to protect the most vulnerable and people need to get back to like normal life. Like, when I heard 15 days to slow the spread, I'm like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because I'm like, if you're slowing the spread, aren't you just prolonging the virus? That's what it seemed like to me. That kind of seemed like common sense. And when like the Great Barrington Declaration came out, I was like, see, other people make sense too. But but Fauci and other people tried to like squash that as soon as it came out to invalidate it. That's just what these people were about. They were just about pushing their sort of end games and their goals. And I don't know how nefarious everything could have been in the end as far as, I don't know, global world order, but it, in the meantime, it just is really disgusting that they push this. So the post millennial decided to take a couple of quotes from the book, and they wrote up a pretty good report. So I'm going to just read through this article really quick. Dr. Deborah Brix, who served in the Trump administration as part of the COVID response team, has admitted in her book and before Congress that much of the guidance issued to mitigate the pandemic was arbitrary. In her book, Silent Invasion, I don't know if that's like referring to COVID or their ideology and their worldview. But when I hear silent invasion, I don't think of COVID being that nefarious. And knowing the content and what I'm about to read to you, it makes me think that Brix is the one who's leading the silent invasion. She discusses the planning that went into an essential component of the strategy to handle COVID, one that has been roundly mocked: 2 weeks to stop the spread. The data used to back it up was from other countries, and Brix intentionally obfuscated her intentions for a robust lockdown. Brix writes in her book, she writes about assembling a team that she could trust to look at the numbers and provide unvarnished analysis free from a hidden or political agenda. There would be no group think within my inner circle. But after deciding to trust the data, Brix noted that the CDC didn't have the demographic data she was looking for. Worse, the data it did have would never help paint an accurate picture of this pandemic outbreak. The data as it was gathered, the sources it was gathered from, and the methods was not adequate to give a clear picture that could be used to make conclusive public health recommendations. Brix said that there was essentially a silent spread of COVID and there was no way to track it. This, she said, led us to the U.S. staying stalled in the containment phase rather than aggressively mitigating. The normal way to track a virus was through detecting symptoms, but without seeing symptoms, there was no way to track it. What Brix was looking for was a plan B. Yeah, it was silent because it infected so many people and without them having any sort of reaction to it. So granted, people get it and it's very bad. Everybody, knows my dad had it really, really, really bad, really bad. So I'm not one of those. I don't think there's anybody exists now that's like, oh, COVID was fake or something like that. But most people didn't do anything for that. So that's why, like the Great Barrington Declaration, they're like, people need to try to go through life. People will be naturally infected and it won't bother a lot of folks or be mild for a lot of folks, but they will continue on with society. People who are at high risk, they should lock down and we should try to protect them, or elderly people, obese people. My dad is like over the mark with the age, and he's also a heavy guy. So, prior sort of health conditions that would make him a target for sure. So, I mean, there are people who were in that danger zone that we could have protected and tried to just go on with our society. But that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to enact this plan B. The existing CDC data wasn't of any use, Brix said, picking apart the CDC's approach, saying that they should have been more forceful in their data collection and in going to the states and demanding information. Despite not having adequate data, Brix pushed ahead with her plans to convince Trump and his advisors to go along with her mitigation plans. She writes that in March 2020, she met with the president, and her plan was to obfuscate her intentions for economic shutdowns, knowing that Trump was wary of anything that would tank the economy he built and worked so hard to build. I couldn't do anything that would reveal my true intention, she writes, to use the travel ban as one brick in the construction of a larger wall of protective measures we needed to enact very soon. Trump's team was more concerned about the impacts for potential for loss of lives to Americans of shutting society down. Yeah, that should have been a concern. And now we're feeling a lot of that concern. Also, shutting down the world in the way that we did, I don't see how that really did much mitigating. So I mean, I think she was wrong in what she was trying to achieve, and I don't think the ends justified the means. She blasts administration for their concerns over the economy, concerns which have played out in real time to a point where the country could be facing devastating impacts, as is the globe. And that's another reason why you don't just have experts who are scientists who, because they, at the end of the day, they don't have, they're advising, but they don't consider everything else in mind of what can happen. And you still need leadership to consider how it's going to impact the country in a long way. And again, she's talking about it's so hard to track this thing because people aren't experiencing the symptoms because they're mostly okay if they catch COVID. So this mitigation thing was just crazy. She writes that the failure here does not belong to any one institution or person. It's bigger than that, broader than that. It defies easy explanation or reflexive answers. It's easy to lay the blame at the feet of the Trump administration, but it's crucial to understand that the CDC had been fully funded for global health security since 2009. In Brix's view, while Trump does take much of the blame, this was a failure of the CDC and the Department of the Health and Human Services. It was because of these failures that when it was time to offer guidance, it was based on speculation, was arbitrary. The 2-week quarantine was eventually lessened to 10 days and then to 5. Brix urges solutions to the problem of data collection, saying that there remains a lack of emphasis on active testing, and there is still no sense of urgency to find the silent community invasion that occurs days to weeks before symptoms. Brix and her cohort relied on data from other countries where the data was available. And it wasn't just with data on spread, but the same was true for vaccines and the durability of vaccine protection. We had to rely on well-collected data from other countries to make decisions. In this country, Brix laments that this was so. Brix presented data culled from European and Asian nations, notably Italy, South Korea, and China. Interpreting data, she wrote, would be the new battlefield. Interpreting data. She pushed a travel ban through, she writes, and then used it, as was her aim, to create a proposal to flatten the curve. Getting the travel ban through was crucial first test of my data-driven approach, she writes, that it worked. Why Italy, South Korea, China, and not like Sweden? Wasn't it like Sweden who just decided to power through? Because they were looking for a particular result. And you know what? Not all these countries have the population of the United States, have the values and just geography. Like there's so much that would go into it. Like the idea that you could stop something like this that was so transmissible. It's terrible for people who caught it, who passed away, people who had such a hard time with it. Again, I know what it's like to really go through it with a family member. I still don't like how the hospital and everybody acted, dealing with my dad's illness. I'm not gonna go into all that today. I have before. But we could have did something better than what we did, and we do have repercussions that we are all feeling now. The way that we printed money, the way that we broke up supply chains, the really early in the pandemic, I remember seeing an article where it was like we could face global hunger if we shut down the economy. I'm like, well, that seems relevant. Didn't that seem relevant? It seemed relevant to me. But that it wasn't relevant to people like Dr. Brix because she came to a conclusion that she wanted to do. and she looked for data that would affirm her position. Getting the travel ban through was a crucial first test of my data-driven approach, she writes. That it worked would, I hoped, make the end of the week pitch for our version of flattening the curve to protect hospitals shut down easier. Brix and her team shifted to high gear to get that plan past the goalie, using not U.S. data, but an amalgamation of data from other nations, which did not include economic data, forecasts, or predictions. In light of this failure of data from all angles, Brix and her team used terms that they believed would be palatable to the economic team, noting that we decided to take these economic-based concerns directly, highlighting preemptive and low-cost interventions. These included hand sanitizers, but not masks, which Brix would later come to regret. As recently as June 2020, Brix wrote a face mask when testifying before the U.S. House. That's pretty crazy if one of the reasons why they really pushed not wearing masks is because they just wanted to trick the economic team into going along with their goals and their plans. Because they did have a radical shift on that. And which part of it they said was, well, we didn't want you guys to buy up all the masks and stuff. This is just wild. Brix laments, looking back, that they were not more stern in their approach to guidance, saying that it is concerning that people would not prioritize the health of others over their own personal liberty. Brix notes that early data from Europe showed widespread compliance. See, the thing about people prioritizing their liberty over like some health stuff, like people want to, you can't like practice your liberty if you're not alive and stuff, but again, people had their concerns about whether Brix's way would even do much in the way of saving lives, but people are concerned about how much liberty you give up during a crisis, because if you're willing to give up a lot of liberty during a crisis, people will just wait to the next crisis to take more of your liberty and not give it back, or they will make a new crisis or exacerbate a crisis that maybe isn't as bad. Like they really like COVID was bad, but the way that they acted was worse. The different measures that we took made it worse, and it made it worse in the ways that we're feeling it now, and they made it go on too long, and they're thinking about doing the same stuff again, and she's like, oh, it was a regret with the mask didn't really work, so why are you like upset still about the mask? But it is bogus that you were like no mask because you're trying to trick the economic team. Or when they said we just didn't want you guys to wear a mask because we thought you were going to buy it up from all the nurses. Like everything, the way they've destroyed a lot of public trust. A lot of people play politics with saving people's lives, but they're so bitter about people who are like, well, you guys wanted your freedoms. Like, darn right we did. We're Americans. And we don't trust you people. We have good reason not to. You're literally tricking us. Like the whole time you're tricking us. I mean, I didn't trust these people. I didn't know if I was like, oh, that evil Dr. Brix. I don't think I ever thought about that. But I mean, I knew there was some like, I don't know, seemed like shady stuff going on. Or I don't know how much shady stuff. Like I thought some stuff was shady, but I just was like mostly disagreeing with these people. But now we're like, oh, you were like literally deceiving us. Okay. In one section, Brix writes about how her team would give draft guidance to the Trump administration only for advisors there to alter or rearrange it, at which time her team would put it back in and deliver it to governors and other agencies. Brix set about trying to get everyone on her team to agree to shut down life measure. Dr. Anthony Fauci wasn't initially on board because he questioned the data. That's interesting. Or lack thereof. It was during a meeting off-site at Brix' home on March 14th, 2020, that Brix broached the idea of a 15-day shutdown, and after reviewing data from Europe, the team agreed. One of the key decisions made at the meeting was on the 15-day time frame during which we'd ask all Americans to do their part. Instead of just asking people to be vigilant during the flu season and to cough and sneeze into their elbows instead of their hands, we'd ask for other behavioral changes more in line with the silent spread mitigation, she writes. Which people also have noted that there was like psychological things that people had to do to get people to comply as well. There's a big psychological component to how they made people comply. To arrive at 15 days, we had relied on the CDC's estimate of this virus's full transmission cycle from inhalation of droplets or airborne particles to viral shedding and effectivity, a maximum of 14 days. This was the justification for the exposure and quarantine times being used around the globe. For her, 15 days was not a maximum, but merely a starting point. Ultimately, she writes, cross-household gatherings needed to be stopped entirely. Households isolated from other households to prevent further spread. Limiting gatherings to 10 has been the first step and was consistent with my spoonful of sugar approach. In short, Brix had plans for a major lockdown, but only gave guidance in small bites in order to soften up the Trump administration and the American public to deletion of their rights to gather freely, to go to work or church impeded, and to live their lives. No sooner had we convinced the Trump administration to implement our version of a 2-week shutdown than I was trying to figure out how to extend it, she writes, despite not having the data to back up her intention. 15 days to slow the spread was a start, she writes, but I knew it would be just that. I didn't have the numbers in front of me yet to make the case for extending it longer, but I had 2 weeks to get them. She convinced everybody to do the 15 weeks, didn't have the data, but she just assumed she would. She was just like, we're gonna cross our fingers, we're gonna gamble with everything, hoping that she's right. But also intending on like going forward regardless if she was right or not, like already planning it. Brix's plans likely would not have been successful had she not laid them bare at the outset, but Americans would not have felt quite so betrayed, so put through the ringer as they did when the guidance kept changing, kept becoming more restrictive. At each step of the pandemic mitigation, Americans gave up their rights, and then only days or weeks later, they were asked to give up more. In reaction to this reality, Rep. Jim Jordan from Ohio questioned Brix before the U.S. House in June, asking, why should Americans believe anything the government says about COVID? He quoted President Biden, who made a number of claims that later proved to be false, such as his statement that those who are vaccinated cannot catch COVID. Jordan referenced Brix's testimony on the lack of data that was used to implement economic and social shutdowns. Jordan further asked Brix, when the government told the American people that people who had been vaccinated couldn't get it, were they guessing or were they lying? I don't know, Brix said. All I know is there was evidence from the global pandemic that natural reinfection was occurring. And since the vaccine was based on natural immunity, you cannot make the conclusion that the vaccine will do better than natural infection, although it can often do slightly better. When the government told us that the vaccinated couldn't transmit it, was that a lie or was that a guess? Or is it the same answer? Jordan asked. I think it was the hope that the vaccine would work in that way, Brix said, going on to say that doctors and public health experts need to be at the table. You said that you think it was hope, Jordan asked. So what do we know is it what do we know is what we do know is it wasn't the truth. So they were either guessing, lying, or hoping and communicating that information to the citizens of this country. I think they were hoping, Brix said, noting again the problems of data and data collection. I'm just stuck with the irony. We've got government agencies guessing, hoping, or lying with information they're presenting to the American people, Jordan said, noting that the Biden administration had looked to create a disinformation governance board when they were the biggest purveyors of misinformation, false information, hopeful information, but not accurate and true information. So that is the article. Do you know what's really crazy to me? Not that all this happened or not that that was her attitude, that she could put it in a book and be like, yeah, I'm great. And just expect that was okay to just like admit everything. All for the cash, right? All for the cash. People buy that book and like, thanks for your honesty, bro. But man, that is wackadoodle that people are so self-assured in the ways that they're so deceitful and evil that they could just put everything down on paper and just, I don't know, not expect any sort of repercussions for it. And I don't think there will be. But isn't that sad? That these people are like openly lying to the American people, that they are willing to shut down, different people on social media if they said differently, that contradicted what was going on with the CDC and etc. And these people are just guessing and hoping. Just guessing and hoping. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd that she would pitch to shut down the nation knowing she didn't have the data, but just hoping that she would have the data eventually in front of her to continue on with her plot. So that's Dr. Brix. And you had Fauci who was like, I don't know about that because the data's not there. And Dr. Fauci is like the villain in all of our stories, right? But little did we know it was Dr. Brix. Daily Wire even has like a video on the true face of Dr. Fauci. Maybe they need to one about Dr. Brix because that is wild. That is wild. And I don't know, she never seemed like, I know she would get up and she speak quite a lot, but she was among them. But I just wouldn't have been like, that's the one plotting all of that deception. Wild. Just wild. Absolutely wild. Okay, next thing I want to talk about, there was a shooting that happened and BLM decided to go ahead and march on behalf of an individual who was shooting up an apartment complex and was shooting into a woman's apartment. I'm going to warn you, there is some swearing in this video, but she confronted the protesters because she's like, this person was shooting at me and my kids in my house. And you guys are here like celebrating this person. By the way, there's like a GoFundMe for him. And there's a GoFundMe for this family who was the victims. I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, the GoFundMe for the person who was shot by the police after like a standoff, by the way, they had more money than the victim. And so now they actually have a scenario where a victim is speaking out and all these people look silly. But then there's some people who tell her to shut up. And then also pay attention to this, because there's people who are like, well, you're alive though. You're alive though. And they're like, well, I see that you're going through something here. And they try to, that I don't know, there's a lot of white people there. There are some black people, but there's like quite a few white people there. And they're like trying to quell her like anger. But to her, it doesn't make sense to glorify someone who was violent and someone who was trying to kill them. And she called the police. They did the right thing happened. They tried to protect the citizen here. They answered the call. And that's another thing people don't really consider as well. They're like, oh, these police, they're evil, they're terrible. Let's defund them, etc. Like, you are aware that people call the police, including in these urban areas and including people of color. I will call the police in a hot second if I feel that I need them. So this video is really wild. I just want to show you guys.
Because you guys are celebrating his life.
It was a terror. I'm sure it was a terror.
This is not okay. Okay.
You're alive.
Okay.
Shut up.
You guys need to just let it go. Grief in silence. This is not okay. This is not a George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. He was unarmed.
You're alive. Sorry.
This is not okay. My kids have to deal with this and probably have a mental illness now because they almost lost their life. There's bullet holes in my kitchen because he sat in the fucking hallway watching my move.
This family wishes this never happened.
I wish it never happened either. I don't have a place to call home. I can't sleep that night.
She's obviously going through a moment.
This is not okay.
Oh my gosh, she's obviously going through a moment. This is absurd. These virtue signaling ninnies are absurd. That they're all here protesting because this person was shooting up indiscriminately, like into her home and stuff. She's a victim. She's like, I don't have no place to live. My kids witnessed this of me trying to of her almost getting killed. Her kids were in danger, and they're like, yep, another vigilant, vigil for this person doing this stuff, and the cops are bad, and you don't have to be okay with like cops going in and these shootouts and stuff happening, but as you said, you can go grieve in silence. But it's pretty wild when people decide to take sides and be like, the cops are bad, they did the wrong thing. Do you remember the Michaela Bryant situation where there was like a police who rolled up and there was two women fighting, and man, they were really going at it, but there was one person who came in with a knife, and within a few seconds of the police officer rolling up on the scene and getting out the car, like he had to shoot this woman, and then people were like, why couldn't he have tased her? Like literally the knife coming down and people angry. It's like he acted within his best judgment within like a few seconds. We're not talking like 60 seconds. It was like very, very quick where he had to decide like to react to save another person's life. And they are angry that he did that. Coming down with a knife. Thinking that, what kind of super tasers do people think that police have? That would, I mean, it has to like connect for it to even work. Like, in that situation, the lethal force was justified, but people were still angry. And for people to be protesting and then coming at this woman who has very good points. Like, how do people think these victims feel? And this is and again, I apologize for like the swearing in it, but it's a great video to show, hey, there are victims out here, and they have certain feelings when you're up here just protesting and you're like doing these vigils and not recognizing that they were terrorizing somebody else, and they called the police for help.
This is what they want to show on the TV. It's obviously going through a moment.
This is not okay. Just go home. Go home. Because none of you guys knocked on that man's door to check his health.
Shut up. He come to my house. Shut up.
No, you guys did not come. He did not. You guys did not come and visit me. This is not the time. This is not the time or the place. It wasn't. It don't matter. It don't matter. Get away from me. Get away. No, because you think it's okay to get in my kid's in the car. My kid's in the car. My black kid is in the car. He tried to kill me in front of my kids. He tried to kill me in front of my kids. He tried to kill me in front.
I mean, who are these random people to be like, it's not the time or the place for you to speak and to say these things? And then they're worried about the PR because she's saying all these things in front of like the cameras, and like, this is what the media wants to show. Like, why shouldn't the media show? And I don't know that the media actually did, because that's obviously taken from a camera phone. And I've been seeing reports of her reaction. I've just seen like this particular video. Like they have a narrative that they want to continue to push, and someone like her, a real victim, actually ruins a lot of what they have to say. After all this time, it's amazing to me that there are people who feel comfortable enough to have like BLM in their profile. There's this one really big account on TikTok called Good Trouble, and I saw their account page recently, and I was like, can you just imagine still having that there, knowing that? I mean, we talked on the show about how there was a Reuters reporter, data analyst, who ended up getting fired because they just looked at the data of like police shootings, and they determined that BLM's like narrative that police are literally like hunting down like Black people isn't true. And he got from all of his data that he got. He also looked at data from a Black guy from Harvard, who thought that there was going to be bias when he looked into the data, and turned out that he couldn't like find the data to complete his theory, and he actually like fired everybody and restarted it because he like something must have went wrong, and then he found the same results. And so not only did he find that BLM was lying, he also found, or what they were saying was untrue, it was actually harmful and causing more Black people to be harmed and killed. So people didn't take kindly to that. He ended up being fired. And so really good like article if you look it up. We talked about it before on the show several times, but it's their narrative is built around a lie. We know the organization is started by some Marxist lesbians who, you know, are trained Marxists. Like when people talked about like other sort of movements falling away, they're like, well, we have a philosophy. We're Marxists. So when people talk about like, I don't know, as if we're some kind of big communist scare with stuff like, no, they've actually said what they've said. People have brought concerns to the fact that they want to disrupt the nuclear family, and like that's something that the disruption of the nuclear family is why you have so many problems in Black communities. So this doesn't seem like you guys are doing anything productive to actually help Black people in the long run. So there's that. But the I think the biggest thing is the fact that their narrative is based upon a lie and it's actually harmful. I think that's the biggest thing. But the biggest thing I think that should be able to wake like the average person the heck up is the fact that they've laundered so much money, wasted so much money. And that's public knowledge now. Really, really public knowledge. So I just can't imagine still being like, yeah, I'm gonna put BLM in my profile. What is wrong with these people? But it's so crazy that they threatened. Someone was like, "Put your hand, take your hand," like very threatening, as if she's about willing to fight this shorter woman. People telling her to shut up, and she's the actual darn victim that the police came to protect. Wild, absolutely wild. Last thing I want to address today is I talked a little bit last week about Eric July. Eric July is a Black libertarian who has started his own comic book company called Rip-A-Verse. So he's with the Blaze. I've been following his content for a while, but he would talk about comic books and how it's gone so woke. And I agree with him. In my opinion, like you have these people who have taken comic books and basically of these great iconic characters, hollowed out those individuals, and just now these social justice warriors are like wearing their skin. Like there's a story about the Joker who was like taking people's faces or whatever. Like that's kind of like it's what it's like with in the writers' room of like Marvel and DC. They're just wearing like the skin of Superman and Captain America and these people, but behind it is just like social justice agendas. So I haven't liked them for some time, and Eric July has complained about a lot on his show, and so he wanted to create his own comic book. And so it hasn't been like released yet. He's doing a pre-order campaign, and he's already made more than $2 million, which is pretty darn impressive. And people are so angry about it, and people have banned people from talking about it in Reddit. Like there's this big like comic books thread. If you mention Rip-A-Verse or Eric July, they will just ban you. It's pretty crazy on Reddit, right? They'll just ban you. People have said racist things to him. I've seen people post gifs in relation to him of that scene in Blazing Saddles when he's like, "Good day, ma'am," and then she's like, "Bleep you, you know, N-word." And I'm like, that's intense. People have said, well, people are only supporting Eric because he's in line with all these other like comic skate, you know, people, and he's like the Black guy who agrees with them, so they're lifting him up, which they don't understand that they're making an argument for Eric, which Eric July talks a lot about how these woke comic book companies or just companies in general will take these traditionally white characters, and then they'll either like race swap somebody, or they'll take the role and then they'll have like the Black person fulfill it. So he'll say you only see legitimacy in white characters. Now, for example, he'll say like Sam Wilson was already his own original character. He was Falcon. And he thinks it's a downgrade for him to be Captain America. Now, when I understand why Marvel did it, I'm not even saying it was a wrong decision for them to ultimately do. And Sam Wilson has been Captain America before in the comic books, and so has Bucky. And when they decided to give the shield after Endgame, which I didn't like Endgame, that was like basically the beginning of the end of the Marvel universe, cinematic universe for me. But he gave the shield to Sam, and some people were mad he didn't give it to Bucky. But my sisters were really, really mad that Captain America was retiring. I didn't like, that was another thing I didn't like. I'm gonna go into all of that, but he gave it to Sam, and I actually defended him giving it to Sam rather than Bucky. Bucky's mind was like still crazy, right? So, but when Eric said like his comment about him, he's being downgraded, he's because he was his original superhero, now he's someone else. I'm like, that's very interesting. And so I had mentioned that on Twitter recently, and people were just like, well, Sam can do more as Captain America because as Falcon, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, why are you guys arguing with me? Because you're making my point that you didn't think that Sam was legitimate enough, valuable enough to carry his own film, to save the world as this person he was before. You think he can do more with this mantle of Captain America, which was Steve's mantle. And people were very angry arguing with me about it, but they kept like affirming exactly what I had said. So it was an interesting observation with Eric, but that point, what he said about people don't find legitimacy unless like some white person like does it first, they're affirming that when they're saying something like, well, he's only successful right now because these white people are lifting him up and using him and propping him up. The truth is that Eric came up with a great idea. There's a problem in the, actually, well, I'm assuming it's a good idea. I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know if it's a good book, but he saw a need in the comic book community because there was so much woke stuff, and he's like, I'm going to build an alternative. And he decided to take the time, and he's going to build his own platform. He built his own like crowdfunding site. But it's not technically crowdfunded, it's pre-ordered. But he didn't want like PayPal or GoFundMe or Indiegogo or whoever to shut him down because of his politics, because he's seen that before. So he's built his own platform, and he did the work ground up. He's very transparent. He's like, hey, we're getting a lot more traffic than we thought. We're fixing things as we go along. But he was able to get like $1 million in like a day, and he's already passed the $2 million mark. And so he saw a need, like that's how the market works. You see a need and a problem, and you're like, I can fix it. Again, I don't know if his product will be good. There's enough people who are willing to give it a shot because they're hungry for an alternative. So on Sunday, yesterday after church, no, I'm sorry, this is Friday night after church, I told my sister, I'm following the story. Nobody else like really in my house like follows Eric July and watches his stuff, but my family's like politically involved in all the comic books, or we were all into comic books. But I was telling my sister, and I have different books, and my sister's an artist. And so I'm just like, hey, Eric July, he ended up making like over $2 million when he launched his like independent like comic book company. And you know what she did? She just like took a moment, raised her head, and was just like, God, I thank you like for when you do that for me. And so that just reminds me of a big difference between like the right and the left, because she didn't take that moment as that how that happened to somebody else, he doesn't deserve it or something. Like, she's like, I believe that can happen for me. She was inspired. She wasn't a hater. A lot of people who hate are they don't see the possibilities from it. They're just angry that other people, and they feel like when someone else succeeds, they have been robbed. There's more than enough opportunity for everyone, especially in the United States. I mean, there are people who are famous in this country for how they put like their hair in a bun. You know, there's people who've been famous because people saw news reports of them, and then they put it in a song, like the Bed Intruder person, for example. And Shmo-Yo. You never know what's gonna happen. There's a Bible verse that time and chance happens for them all. And are you going to be ready when it's your time and your chance? Well, we believe like in America, like it's a land of opportunity. And if you have enough vision and if you have enough drive, that you'll be able to achieve your goals and your dreams. But when before Trump was president, people would write all these rap songs about how they Trump had all this money and stuff. They want to be like Donald Trump because they saw how much wealth he had, so much influence he had, and he was very big on building his brand. And people wanted to emulate and have something like that for themselves. They're like, Trump has his own bread, I want to go get my own bread. But with the left, it's like, no, they want you to take crumbs for people and then resent the fact that you're only getting crumbs and then demand the whole table. Like, I can't just take your bread. I want your cheese and your wine and everything else. That's what it's like on the left. And it's like they really, really resent success. They don't feel like if you have success that you have earned it. They feel like you have stolen it from somebody and you're not capable of building something. Remember, Obama was like, you didn't build that. Like, he had enough goal to say that to people and to believe that. And that's why you have people who are willing to buy $10 socialist popsicles of the Eat the Rich. I don't know if you guys saw that. There's this stand, and I think it was New York, selling these popsicles of like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and you just like Eat the Rich, and you buy $10 for a popsicle to suck it to the elitist class. Well, obviously someone is taking advantage with their capitalistic expectations and goals and dreams because they're paying $10 for a popsicle. So it's really bizarre to me how much they hate Eric, but I'm not surprised. These are people who they believe in really, really, really taxing people, and it's virtuous to it's more virtuous than charity, right? Because you might be super rich and be like, I'm going to give back. I'm going to give hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. That's not good enough. You have to be taxed, so the government can come in with like I guess the threat of the gun of the government, right? Because they can do that legal, or you go into jail basically if you don't pay what they want you to pay, and if you don't find a way to like do some magic with your tax accountant or something. You have to have your stuff confiscated and they will redistribute it the way that they see fit, even though every single person is capable of being charitable. And if everyone was charitable to some degree, you could solve a lot of issues. But they're like, no, we have to take it from these people who have an abundance and then trickle it in very, very ineffective ways. And they're willing to enrich other politicians like Bernie Sanders and AOC, all these people. They're willing to enrich people like that in order to achieve their goals. Like how much money that people donated to Beto O'Rourke or Stacey Abrams has raised a lot of money for her campaign, and most of it has come from like California and other places like that. Not people from Georgia, people from across the country. And a lot of people get involved in politics because they know that they can raise a lot of money. And there's like equivalents on the right that will like run in a seat, like if someone who ran against like AOC, for example, or in a race like that, they're like, I'm running against AOC. People are like, oh yeah, let's beat her. When financially, it's just not feasible how the makeup is of the demographics of the area. Now, people should still run in those seats. I believe in that. I ran in an unwinnable seat. But people who like legitimately think that someone's going to be able to turn a seat in an election because you gave them a bunch of money, that's not really how it works. It would take like some kind of weird miracle for that to work. So I'm proud of what Eric has accomplished, not because I know him. He's like 3 of my tweets. I've never had a conversation. I would like to have Eric on my show. I think that would be cool. I do enjoy his content and have watched a lot of his videos. And I do really enjoy it. But the reason why people like Eric and want to support Eric is because they feel that there's a mutual respect there. As if I'm a customer, I want the person who I'm buying from to have a respect for me. I don't feel that respect from like Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and I haven't for a long time. I feel like they truly resent me. They resent my values. They resent my families, the values that I grew up with, the values instilled within me by my father, who wanted to learn how to read because his father brought him home a comic book when he was a little boy. So he wanted to go to school so he could know what his comic books were saying. like there's a long lineage of so many hours of like conversations and driving to comic book conventions and costume parties and all kinds of different stuff. Like I'm not like a normie. I'm not like a random person talking about this stuff for clicks. Like I like was ingrained in the culture before I talked politics. I talked comic books. Me and my sisters had a show called The Gorgeous Geeks. So like I'm pretty invested in it. But I don't feel the love for the customer from Marvel and DC. It's just resentment, and they build stuff for the for the customer they want rather than the customers that have made them rich. And Eric, he's going to have to make a good product because he doesn't have the benefit of having these iconic characters that they can just hollow out and put their own garbage in. He has to actually make his own stuff. And I don't know how good the book will be, but people are willing to give it a try. So I wish him the best. The people who are angry at him and coming at him, trying to censor him and punishing people who want to just talk about him and are willing to ban them from subreddits, which is really wild. And the more vitriol that people throw his way, the more he's going to be able to come back and put another dollar in his pocket. And as the Bible says, like God can make your enemy your footstool, and I think that's what Eric is saying, and he's gonna be able to rise higher the more of these people hate on him. So I would say that these people should go out and create their own stuff or just support the stuff that they love. But Eric had a really good motto. He said, "Don't give more than 50% of your money to people who hate you." I was like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense, and I've quoted that a lot on the show. And I've encouraged people to put investor dollars into people who care for them and respect them and aren't trying to socially destroy the fabric of our society. So, and he says his comic books aren't going to really have that sort of political, bent or anything. They're just like for entertainment, and we do need spaces where we can come together and just enjoy stuff because we're losing that all the time. It was unfortunate that sports got so woke. It's unfortunate that entertainment got so woke. The TV shows that we watch, the books that we read. It would be nice if we could just, I don't know, watch SVU without woke stuff. I haven't actually watched SVU in a long time because of one particular episode that they had that was really woke back in the day. I'll have to explain that later, but that was just an example. Just an example. But best of luck to him. Instead of, I'll just leave you guys with this before I do my closeout. Instead of like asking like, God, why'd you move for that person? We need to praise God and be like, if you can do it for them, you can do it for me. Like that needs to be the attitude. I have that shirt, like be better, not bitter. Like that's a way that people need to learn to live their lives and do not hate on other people because they have success, but just know that you too are capable of achieving that success. And I think that is a big fundamental difference between people on the right and people on the left. And I think that's why if people could get past their political bias, I think that's why there's a lot of people, black people, for example, like Trump, and more people could possibly like Trump because they can see like a future that they want to build for their families. They want to get them out of the hood. They want to be able to take care of their families. But when they do that, they don't want to one day wake up and then more than 50% of their income is gone because some leftist white middle class person didn't want to pay for their college or upper class, right? Because a lot of this like college loan debt is going to help like upper graduate or undergraduates or whatever. So not like low income families and other stuff like that who a lot of them decide not to go to college, but that doesn't fly right with a lot of people, and we are like seeing a bigger like political shift, but we'll have to talk about that maybe tomorrow. Anyway, again, I'm proud of Eric, and I'm glad that he decided to do what he did, and I hope more people stand up and decide to keep creating content and a parallel sort of economy, so we don't have to feel that we have to give our money to people who despise us to just sit and laugh and enjoy escapism as we used to. Thank you guys for the watching today. I hope you enjoyed the show. We've talked about various things, starting with some really, really dark stuff to more on a lighter note. Please make sure that you guys check out my website, check out my different videos on the website. Please check out different articles that I have, like this one with like Matt Walsh and J.K. Rowling. talking about Macy Gray. That was a pretty interesting conversation, and how it ultimately ended. Maybe I'll have to write an update on that. I did write a story about Media Matters going after Allie Stuckley. I am working right now on a nonfiction abortion book, which is expanding on my article about, yes, the Bible is blatantly against abortion. I can make secular arguments all the time, and I am gonna there's gonna be a lot of stuff that if you're not a Christian, you can use it in the book as well. But I find it interesting that so many people who aren't Christian, by the way, are trying to use the Bible to, I don't know, shame, guilt other Christians who maybe just can't argue well, or haven't really read much, I guess, into being pro-choice. Or maybe there are people who are kind of more versed and they kind of have more kind of twisted philosophies. So I see a need, so I'm putting that book together. And I think I'll be able to complete it pretty fast. I'll keep you guys updated. Please check out different shirts that I have on the website, like the Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt. I love the I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For. I talked about the Be Better Not Bitter shirt. Really, really love that one. And also show the My Money, My Business shirt that you guys can check out. Also, I mentioned that I'm a content creator. I do write books, and I do have plenty that you guys could check out. My website is ninjadustpublishing.com, but if you go to blackteennews.com, if you can go to the merchandise, there's a banner that'll take you to my book website. All my stuff is on Amazon if you just look for Christina L. Barr. I have children's chapter books like Super Kid 2. It's not a political book, obviously, but it does have a lot of good, wholesome values that you guys would really like and enjoy and like to pass down to your kids. I'm sure I've had some viewers get these books for their kids and they really enjoyed them. And also, I've had some adults who watch the show who have read through them and have really found the books to be very pleasant. So you guys can check out those books. I do also write books for young adult, new adults. You guys can check out that stuff as well. Also have historical fiction fantasy books. A lot of my books deal with they're not as maybe sweet as you would probably imagine. But a lot of my books are really about overcoming the darker nature of humanity, I guess. There's always, even though some elements can be darker, it's about always a positive thing in the end. So I encourage you to check out some of my stuff. I also have my faith book, Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear, which I wish people had read instead of listening to Dr. Brix all the time, because we could have been somewhere a lot better than we are today. So go ahead and check that out on the website. Thank you guys for viewing today. Thank you for people in the comments. I see a friend in the comments. Hey girl, how you doing? Miss Johnson. Thank you guys for viewing, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.